Hey everyone, my name is Sara Harberson. I am America's college counselor. It's good to be back here once again for another Facebook Live. There's a lot going on in college admissions, and I'm glad that you're here to join me. Make sure to let me know where you're coming from. Are you a parent? Are you a student? And what questions are on your mind? We've got high school seniors who are about to hear back from a lot of early action schools. Probably by the end of this week, we'll hear of most of those early action results, but we've got regular decision coming through as well. And then we've got high school juniors who are going to be picking their classes for next year. High school freshmen and sophomores doing the same thing, and lots of questions about courses and summer and letters of recommendation and the SAT and ACT. So I want to make sure that I get to as many questions as I can. Just want to make sure we're doing well here. But it looks like you all are listening in and you're beginning to ask some questions. I will mention that if you like access to my information, there's a lot of free resources on my website, saraharberson.com. Also, for all these Facebook Lives, we record them and save them so you can access them at any time. But if you want more support, more daily support through the admissions process, I have a number of Application Nation groups that you can join. There is Application Nation for the class of 2025 and 2026. Application Nation 2024 just launched about last week, and then I've got Application Nation class of 2023, and then we have our AN or Application Nation alumni. So after you go through the admissions process, you have this incredible group of families who stay connected through AN alumni. So a lot of opportunities for you to get access to me so that I can answer your questions on a regular basis, but also help along the way. All right, let's start answering some of these questions that have come in. The first one is, Sara, can you talk about negotiating merit and the proper etiquette related to that? Thank you. Absolutely. So some colleges will provide the student with their merit scholarship if they offer it, and if the student is getting one. Sometimes they will offer the merit scholarship at the time the student is admitted, and sometimes it's a little bit later in the year. It really depends on the college or university. If the student gets that merit scholarship back and they were hoping for more, or maybe another college that is farther down on their list gave the student more merit money, then they can appeal. You can do this for need-based financial aid, and most of the time you can do it for merit aid as well. Now, some colleges will tell you that they don't negotiate merit aid. Some colleges will say that they don't, but they do. So it's always worth asking, and I would contact the admissions office if you're wondering. There could be some kind of a form that you need to fill out, but if not, I recommend that the student write an appeals letter to the admissions office explaining why they're hoping to get more merit aid. It could be related to the family's finances, the family situation. It could be the student could mention some new accolades or achievements or awards and honors that they've gotten since submitting their application. And they can also list or provide the merit offer from other colleges that they've already been admitted to. Now, a college is probably not going to increase merit aid based on another college's merit aid just by that fact. But if that other college that offered that student more merit money is a true competitor, yeah, they'll probably take it a whole lot more seriously. So I would definitely include those other offers. I just mentioned this in my Zoom call with Application Nation class of 2023 before doing the Facebook Live. And I mentioned to them that especially with merit appeals, timing means everything. So If you are appealing for more merit money as you get closer to that May 1st enrollment deadline, you're probably going to have you tend to have better results. You don't want to wait too long, but I would say in early April, if you've got all of your acceptances and all of your merit offers, that's when you should be trying to see if you can increase that merit aid at the college that you ultimately want to enroll at. Next question. Hi, Sarah. What should my daughter do summer before senior year, activity-wise? What will build that resume section? Okay. I would say summer before senior year is probably the most important summer for students applying to college because it is a big chunk of time, usually about 10 to 12 weeks long, and the student has the opportunity to do a lot of things right before they start filling out their applications. When a student is filling out the activities or extracurricular activities list, what you do in the summer, that can be placed in that activities list. I will tell students, summer after 9th grade often never makes the list or makes the cut. Sometimes what a student does after 10th grade can make the list, but it's really that summer experience between 11th and 12th grade that can have the most influence. I recommend that the student takes a step back right about now and looks at all the things on their list and figures out what they are missing or what they don't have time to do during the school year. So let's say the student hasn't had an opportunity to do any community service in high school. I would want them to use some part or maybe all of their summer devoted to community service, especially if they don't have anything on their list currently. If the student is applying for a specific major and they have an interest in it, but they have no extracurricular activities related to it, I would want them doing something related to that major, that industry, the summer before senior year. If the student needs to get a job, a full-time job, because they need to pay for gas or help out their family, that is valued just as much as anything else. So look to see what you need to do. Look to see what you don't have time to do during the school year and what's missing from your activities list. But ideally, we want to have at least one thing on your activities list that is going to back up your major choice. And so if you haven't had time to do it before the summer, make sure to squeeze it in right before senior year. Next question. Hi, Danielle. Hi, Sarah. If a student commits to a school before the merit scholarships are released, could the merit offer be affected by the amount or even if the student receives it at all? Absolutely, yes. The main reason why colleges are going to give out merit scholarships, if they do offer them, they're giving them out because they're trying to increase the odds that the student will enroll at that college. So that's why, unless you applied early decision, don't rush to submit your enrollment deposit because you actually have more leverage when we're talking about appealing your merit scholarship. If they know you're planning to enroll and merit is awarded after that, they have no incentive to actually give you any merit money. So I would wait. Remember, unless you got admitted to an early decision 1 or an early decision 2 program, the student has until May 1st to make a decision. And remember, those colleges are going to be squirming leading up to that May 1st enrollment deadline for all the rest of the students. So you've got the most power in the spring to see if they will offer more merit money to you. Next question. AN 2023 accepted early decision with a generous need-based grant merit. If private scholarships exceed student responsibility, how can we avoid scholarship displacement when school won't allow the scholarship to be applied to the expected parent contribution? This is a complicated question. Thank you, Jill, for asking it. When a student receives an outside scholarship, I don't know, maybe there was a local scholarship in their community, maybe they get, a really big national scholarship that provides the student money. A lot of times, depending on the college, a lot of times though, the financial aid office, the college that the student is planning to enroll at, they will use that money that the student is getting, and then expect really more from the family, financially speaking. So the first step is, if you're getting an outside scholarship, you've already received your financial aid package, I often will encourage the parents, not the student in this case, the parents, to reach out to the financial aid office and find out how that scholarship will affect the financial aid award. Because a lot of times, as I mentioned, the college will say, well, you've got all this extra money on hand. Some colleges won't do that, but it's really college dependent. So you want to contact them to find out. If they have a very strict policy that will not permit you to, or a strict policy that will make, in the end, you owe more money, then they're not going to budge on that. That would be an institutional policy. It's unfortunate, and especially if the student is locked in an early decision, but it's unfortunate that they do that. But if there's outside money coming in, for some colleges, they say, all right, that means that this is going to be more affordable. So start with the financial aid office. But ultimately, the only time a student can be released from the binding agreement of early decision is because of a financial reason. So if you are at that point, there still could be time where the student could be released from that binding agreement and still be able to apply to some schools. And for a student that is still in negotiation with the financial aid office after being admitted in early decision, my guess is they haven't withdrawn their other applications at that point anyway. Next question. My son is applying to a couple pay-to-play summer programs. I think that's what pay-to-play programs. How do admissions officers rank such programs in prestige? The ones he's applying to require long applications, and some even need teacher recommendation letters. Yes, and some of them are going to need a high school transcript and extra essays, and it can be a really competitive program. I would just say that if students are looking at highly selective colleges, I find that the pay-to-play programs don't help a student in the admissions office, in the admissions process. In fact, sometimes it can actually be damaging in the admissions process, because the highly selective colleges, they are very careful about privilege and awarding a student who has the money to be able to attend one of those pay-to-play programs, even though some of these programs are super, super competitive. So any student that's looking at highly selected colleges, I tell them, don't waste your parents' money. You can do so much for no amount of money in your community by giving back or doing something on your own. So I'm not a big fan of these pay-to-play programs, because I know how they're viewed by certain colleges, especially the more selective ones, and they would cost sometimes thousands of dollars. So I would rather the student do something meaningful in their community that isn't going to cost their family anything. Next question. Hi, Hallie. My student has an alum interview, and they asked him to send his main personal essay, transcript, resume, and any essay samples that will give a fuller picture of him as a student and individual prior to the interview. How do you suggest he handle this request? Oh my word. Well, if this is an alumni interviewer, they are not privy to the student's application. Do they want to see what's in the student's application? Absolutely, but they are not supposed to be asking for most of that information. What is common for alumni interviewers to ask going into an interview with a student is a resume. That's pretty common, just because they're used to that in the work environment. But for all those other requests, that alumni interviewer has no business asking for that information. If you want to double check, I would recommend in this situation that the student's counselor contact the admissions office. But I can guarantee you they're going to tell the school counselor that is unacceptable. The alumni interviewer is not permitted to ask for that information. The only information that the interviewer really needs is the student's name, their contact information, to be able to arrange the interview. But again, a lot of them will ask for a resume, which is very kosher, but everything else, none of their business. So I would start with the counselor at the high school and see if they'll reach out to the college on behalf of the student, or the student can simply say, I'll provide my resume, but that other information is information that the college admissions office has asked for, and leave it at that. Okay. Next question, is it smart to ask the college professor for an extra letter of recommendation if my son is applying to that college as well as other colleges? He will be doing research project for his junior year as well as the summer between 11th and 12th grades. Project will likely continue into senior year. Wow, what a great opportunity. You will find a couple things. Most colleges, especially the more selective colleges, a lot of them will tell the public that they will permit extra letters of recommendation. They will say that, but the reality is a little bit different. The reality is that they probably aren't going to look at those extra letters of recommendation, or if they do, they're not going to spend a whole lot of time on them, and they usually are not going to be an influencer in the admissions decision. That said, if the student is working with the professor one-on-one, doing research for several years, that professor can really get to know the student. And the question is going to be, are they going to be willing to go to bat for the student in that letter of recommendation? And I find that that letter of recommendation from the professor is probably going to mean a whole lot more if the student applies to the college where the research is being conducted. If it's for another college, a lot of times, again, those letters are permitted, but they aren't really valued as much in the admissions process. Next question. Hi, Sarah. If a student doesn't know what he wants to major in, the student is strong in English and science, do you need to express your major when you apply? The student is currently a junior. So I'm a big believer in listing a major choice on the application, because when I was a brand new admissions officer in my early 20s, the way that I was trained to read an application is to look at the student's major choice and then be looking for key things throughout the application based on that. And then later on, as I became an associate dean of admissions and a dean of admissions, and I was training admissions officers how to read applications, that was something that I focused on as well. So the major choice can be a very important touch point in the application, because you will hear me say, if you've watched a bunch of my Facebook Lives or Instagram Lives, or you're part of Application Nation, you will often hear me say, make sure that you put the major down on your application that you have the most evidence for. Maybe you've taken advanced classes in that subject matter. Maybe your highest grades are in that subject matter. Maybe the teacher who taught you that subject matter is one of your letter writers. Ideally, there are a couple, maybe one or two activities on your activities list that match up or provide evidence for that major. So it can be extremely helpful for the student. It can really strengthen their application to be smart about what major they pick, and it can be very helpful for the admissions officer. You just have to be aware that if you're applying to, especially a large university with a lot of different undergraduate schools, you've got to be careful about what majors are offered within the undergraduate school that you are applying to, because you're usually not bound to the major that you list on your application, but you are bound to the undergraduate program. So let's say you are applying to the University of Michigan, and they have LSA, which is their liberal arts program. They have the engineering school. They have the Ross School of Business. You want to be careful that if you're really interested in one undergraduate school, but you list a major in another undergraduate school, you want to be aware of that, because it's usually more difficult to transfer from one undergraduate school to another. Very easy to change your major, though. Most colleges will require the student to declare their major usually second semester of sophomore year, so there's a lot of time. So especially if you're in the liberal arts and you list English, but then after you get admitted, you decide, I want to be a history major, it's going to be very easy to do that. But the major that you list on your application, especially the first one listed, that's the major that puts your application into context. That's how your application will be read. So if you list a major second or third that you might be interested in, those will be looked at, but it's the major you list first that's really going to dictate how your application's read. If you're completely undecided, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. But I would say that the more selective colleges will require a supplemental essay about your academic interest. And when you are undecided, that essay can feel a little too neutral. And so having that major can really help with those supplemental essays. For colleges that have more generous acceptance rates, applying as an undecided major is probably not going to affect your admissions decision. Next question. My son is a STEM guy and really doesn't want to take a 4th year of foreign language. How much of an issue do you think this is for highly selective colleges? I've gotten a lot of questions this week about that same question because I did a reel on this and I think we posted it maybe on Monday, and I've gotten a bunch of questions since then. If the student has taken foreign language through junior year and they insist on not taking foreign language senior year, it's probably okay, but I would say the student would absolutely need to make sure that they fill that slot that would have been taken by that foreign language class for senior year, that they fill that slot with another core academic class, not an elective class, like a Sara Harberson approved academic core class, because colleges really will expect 5 core classes at the very least for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. You also want to remember that the most competitive students are going to have foreign language and the same consistent foreign language through senior year. What is the suggestion for sophomores to do in the summer? What should they be preparing for? Well, I would say that a lot of sophomores, that summer after sophomore year, they can actually begin test prep. So that's a possibility. For the current sophomores, that's the class of 2025, they're going to be the first class to have the digital SAT available to them. So just be aware of that. But they could also be considering the ACT. So I recommend the summer between sophomore and junior year, they can begin some test prep. They can dig a little deeper about their major choice and maybe set something up that matches up with their major choice in the summer. They can get a job depending on their age, so they can do a lot of things. Try to avoid those pay-to-play programs because, again, they're super, super expensive and they're absolutely not expected by most colleges. Hi, Sarah. Do the admissions officers at need-blind colleges even know if a student is applying for financial aid? When I was an admissions officer and an associate dean at a need-blind college, I did know if the student was applying for aid, but that doesn't really mean anything, and probably things have changed since then because colleges can now block information from their admissions officers. Like if the student mistakenly leaves their SAT or ACT scores on their application, but they're applying test optional, that can be blocked by their admissions officers. So it's very easy to do that with Common App, for example, nowadays. But just because a student applies for need-based financial aid doesn't really mean anything. It's all about, if they actually qualify for need-based financial aid. So just keep that in mind. But for need-blind colleges, the admissions officer really is just focusing on the admissions application. All the financial aid forms, all that financial information goes straight to the financial aid office. So they know, working at a need-blind college, that they have a great financial aid budget. So whatever the student needs to be able to attend that institution, they're going to be able to meet that need. When you have to submit your first semester senior year grades for most selective schools, do all the schools, even the ones that don't request them, also see the grades since they are sent from the counselor via the Common App? Is there any way to only send the first semester grades to the schools that request those first semester senior year grades? I know exactly what you're asking. So I just talked about this in our AN 2023 Zoom call. You're going to find that at most of the highly selective colleges and universities in this country, so those are colleges that have low acceptance rates, both private and public, almost all of them are going to require those mid-year grades, those first semester grades of senior year. When it comes to the very selective and selective colleges, it's going to vary, but a lot of the very selective colleges will also require those first semester grades. But some high schools have policies where, just to make things a little bit easier for their counseling staff will tell students, well, we're sending first semester grades to every single college on your list, whether they've asked for them or not. I wish they didn't do that. I wish they would only submit the first semester grades to the colleges that require them or ask for them, or it's going to help the student. But I know that there are a lot of high schools that have this kind of a policy. I will say that if it's a very large public university that does not look at first semester grades, they probably won't even be processed. So keep that in mind. My daughter, who is a junior, will likely seek a public policy major at a highly selective school. She has followed the 5-4 plan. Excellent. If you're wondering, I have a blog about my 5-4 plan. For her senior year classes, she really wants to take AP Economics instead of another history class. Economics is considered a class under the history program at her high school. Do colleges consider that as well? And will this follow my 5-4 plan? Yes, it will. So the 5 core classes that I want students to take ideally for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade are English, math, science, foreign language, and history or social studies or social science. So all those history classes will fill that core slot, but also economics, even AP psychology is considered a social studies in the admissions process, even if it's counted as a science at your high school. So I think she's in good shape. Hi, Sarah. Is there a downside to retaking the SAT? My daughter scored in the range for very competitive colleges, but believes she can do better. I like her. She wants to take it again. Is there a potential upside of 20 to 30 points worth the potential downside of 50 to 60 points? Absolutely. There's always an upside because almost every college in the country, there are some exceptions, there are some big public universities that will not super score the SAT, but most of them do. And so taking it again can be really helpful for a student. So even if they go down in one section, but they go up in the other, almost every single college is going to take the highest score from the math section, whatever date it was on, and the highest score on the reading and writing section to create the highest composite SAT or combined SAT score. So I have no problems with a student retaking the SAT or even the ACT. You will find that most colleges will also super score the ACT, just not as many will super score the ACT compared to the number of colleges that will super score the SAT. So it can definitely benefit you to retake. There are a couple of colleges out there, Georgetown comes to mind, that will require the student to report every single standardized test they take and the score that they get. So every single AP exam, every single SAT and ACT. For Georgetown, if you're applying, you have to provide all of those scores. For most of the other colleges in this country, you only have to provide the scores you want to provide in the admissions process. Next question, how many sessions should a 10th grader attend a test prep? What should a junior take when should a junior take their first SAT or ACT? So, test prep is going to vary. There's so many options out there and every student learns a little bit differently. So I've had students that literally get a study guide and study on their own and take a bunch of practice tests, and that's the way that they prep. Some students will take a class, whether it's in person or online. Some students will work one-on-one with a tutor, and it's really going to vary on what they're going to need. I find, though, that the student has to be engaged not only in taking that standardized test, but in the prep work involved. So as parents, we want to make sure that if we're going to spend money on test prep, that our child is going to take advantage of it. If they're doing the bare minimum in terms of homework and they're not taking the practice test, their scores probably aren't going to go up. You want to talk to the tutor to find out how many sessions it's going to take leading up to a test, because you want to get a sense of how much budget you need to put aside. But in terms of when to take it, I think for a high school junior, and that's really the earliest that I generally would recommend, the earliest would be the end of the summer right before junior year, or the fall of junior year would be super, super, super early. Most students do not take the SAT or ACT for the first time until winter or early spring. Next question, is taking a community college course in the intended major a worthwhile use of time to show commitment and one soundbite? I love that you mentioned the soundbite. Yes, a lot of times in a student soundbite, their academic interest will come through. And if you're not familiar with soundbite, I wrote a book called Soundbite, and it's my entire approach to helping students apply to college. But taking classes in the area that you want to major in is ideal. But taking a sociology class or an anthropology class at your high school actually isn't considered a core class. It's usually an elective class. So some students will say, you know what, let me take the community college class and do really well in it. Obviously, I'd want the student to do really well in the class, but yes, that's absolutely acceptable. And admissions officers are always going to prefer those community college classes over even your local university or some fancy university somewhere else. The community college is easily accessible to students, and the price is always always a low cost, especially compared to a major university. So I tell students, though, be careful with taking a lot of college classes. You're technically not expected to do that. You want to exhaust the curriculum at your high school first. And if you have room in your schedule and you're able to take a class, absolutely, a community college class would be awesome. Just if you sign up for these classes, you have to take them seriously, and I'd want you to do well because I'd want you to share that grade. Just imagine if you're applying as a sociology major for college applications and you took sociology at the local community college and you got an A or an A+ in it. You would want those colleges to see that, and that is providing even more evidence for your major choice. For highly selective schools, should you submit an AP with a score of 4? Sorry if this has been asked. You know what? This is probably one of the questions I get asked the most, and I am really particular about what students share on their application, especially when it comes to scores. The thing is, about these AP scores, besides Georgetown, there really isn't, well, MIT seems to want them every single one too, but most colleges are not going to require AP scores for the application process. If you wanted to get credit after you enroll, you'd have to provide documentation about that. So I'm very particular, except if we're dealing with Georgetown or MIT, about scores. Only report the scores that are going to strengthen your application. I remember working at the University of Pennsylvania and seeing students not get admitted because they got a 4 on an AP exam, which, by the way, I don't think I could ever get a 4 on an AP exam. I'd probably be getting 1s, 2s, and 3s. 4 is a great score, but 5 is the highest. And so I saw students not getting admitted for 4s, especially if it was in the subject matter that matched up to their major choice. So in Application Nation, when you reach that point in the process, that's usually August, September, when we're filling out the application together, and we spend a lot of time on that testing section, I will individually tell students, all right, I'll ask them what their major is, what their AP scores are, what colleges they're applying to, and I will give them very specific advice to them individually about which scores should be shared in the testing section of the application. Last question. My daughter is a junior and takes all AP and honors classes. Awesome. She also plays sports all 3 seasons. Holy moly. She has very little time to do anything else. Is it going to be a problem that she has not joined any clubs? So, the thing is, you've got to follow your heart, right? That's what we want to do in our own lives. We want our kids to follow their what is important to them. I would say, if those sports are at the high school, she's doing things within her high school community. I would say it's always nice to have a membership within a school club if you can. A non-athletic club would be great, but if it doesn't work out, that's okay too. But just make sure that she's got consistent involvement for all 4 years, at least for a few of her things, and it sounds like she does for her sports. But I would say join a club, maybe do it junior year. I wouldn't wait until senior year because it's that longevity and long-term commitment that's going to be really valued in the admissions process. on that note, I think we've got to wrap up. It was really great to see you all here for the first Facebook Live of 2023. Great turnout as well. Great questions as always. If you like being able to get your admissions questions answered on a regular basis, definitely consider joining Application Nation. As I mentioned, the Application Nation Class of 2024 group is now open, and we'll be taking members for a little bit, and you can ask questions 24/7, and you have access to all those extra add-on offers like essay editing and mock interviews and college list reviews and course selection reviews, application reviews, all those things that give you that peace of mind if you or your child is applying to college. So I hope you'll join. In the meantime, if not, I will see you back here again next month for another Facebook Live. Have a great night, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.